Welcome to another edition of the Florida Chamber's Bottom Line with our special guest, House Budget Chairman Representative Denise Grimsley and Mark Wilson, President of the Florida Chamber. Welcome, thank you for being here. Chairman, let's get started. The state of Florida is facing a budget crisis, and the House and the Senate have to address the budget, but they're also a little bit apart. How do you handle that?
Well, there are considerable differences, and let me start by saying we are in week 5 of the budget process, and we have both passed our respective budgets, and we will now go into a conference process this week. And the biggest challenges we face overall is the increase in Medicaid, which has just grown phenomenally over the past few years. And then we're also looking at the problem of the stimulus money that we took from the federal government, which has now gone away. We refer to that as a stimulus flameout. So those are our big challenges. But overall in the budget, the Senate and the House are about $3 billion apart, and they're for a variety of reasons, so it's going to be a little bit challenging to reconcile those differences.
Yeah, and I think from the Florida Chamber's perspective, I think that the state government is trying to do what small businesses and families are doing, which is when your expenses exceed your revenues, you can't, that doesn't work. And so our leaders in the House and Senate and the governor are trying to find a way to make ends meet, and I think they're putting job creation number one. We're happy with where things stand.
One of the differences in the House and Senate budget is tied to the state pension fund. How do you reform that? How do you make up the differences?
Well, I think you have to look at the pension plan overall. I mean, our system in Florida hasn't really been reformed for a number of years. In the 90s, we looked at it, and that was when DROP was added to the program. But prior to that, it was like in the 70s, I believe, when any last significant reform is done. And it is really time to look at it to modernize the system. But we also, because of the economic environment that we find ourselves in, just like businesses, we really had to take a hard look at everything, and that included employee benefits. And while, you know, when I was a business owner, we took great pride in the fact that we were able to provide benefits to our employees with no cost to them. But unfortunately, as time grew on and the economy changed, it was imperative that we had to ask them to participate, which is the same thing the government is seeing right now in the state.
And I think what Representative Grimsley brings to the table is if she's from small business. And so having people up here who are trying to fix the state budget, who come from a business background, will really serve the state well. On the pension side, I think what we have right now is unsustainable and it's unfair. We're the only state in the country where state workers don't contribute to the pension. And it's not fair because local government workers oftentimes contribute 7 to 10% into their retirement, yet state workers contribute 0, and it just needs to be fixed.
Chairman, will this modernization of the pension fund make a difference in the state budget?
It will. You know, the change that we proposed in the House, the Senate has one plan, they call it a 246 plan, which is very intriguing what they've suggested. Unfortunately, we don't have any actuarial studies, so I don't really know how much their plan will save. We've looked at a 3% contribution by employees to the retirement, as well as eliminating the DROP program and then extending the retirement age. That saves us around $710 million annually, which is a significant savings to the state.
You're also faced with strengthening Florida's economy and creating jobs to put Floridians back to work. How do you address that?
The budget will address that. There are a variety of things, though it's not just the budget. Overall, the legislature is looking at addressing different things like deregulation. You know, I can tell you in our business, we dealt with 6 different regulatory agencies, which is one of the reasons I ran, because of the difficulty. They don't talk to each other. And from the governor's office down to the legislature, we're looking at every way possible to coordinate those activities, reduce regulation on businesses, and reduce regulations on professions.
Yeah, and in addition to reducing regulations and legal reform and so forth, what Florida needs to do on our economic development structure is we have to make it faster. When companies look at creating jobs in Florida, they want to do it now, and they need an answer now, not in 6 months or 9 months. And so I think we're headed that way this session as well.
With that, let's close up the program with the bottom line of the week.
The things that we need to address this week is the House and Senate need to move toward budget conference. At the end of the day, the legislature is going to pass a budget, which we are constitutionally mandated to do. We're going to pass it. It's going to be balanced. We're not going to raise taxes. And we're going to do what I've always said as a business owner we're going to do. We're going to do everything we can to get the government off the backs of business.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that what the Florida Chamber would ask is we have to keep our priorities straight. And as the legislature deals with this budget problem, we can't cut funding to education, to transportation over the long term. These are the things that drive the economy. And these are tough choices. And the bottom line for us is to try to prioritize the budget for the benefit of Florida's future.
With that, we thank you for joining us, Chairman Grimsley. Thank you, Mark. And to our viewers, we hope your bottom line is looking up.